welcome to HUD's second webcast on RAD. We apologize, we had some momentary difficulties, technical difficulties. We think that we've solved them. Last time we did get some reports that a number of you were experiencing some difficulties, many weren't. Just want to let you know if you are having problems today that we will have this on the RAD webpage for later viewing. And it should be not an issue technically if you're having problems now. It shouldn't be later when it's on the RAD webpage. Hopefully we'll be fine. My name is Patrick Costigan. I work in the Secretary's office here at HUD. I'd like to introduce my other colleagues. To my far right is Greg Byrne in our Office of Public and Indian Housing, also Diane Thompson in PIH, and Margaret Salazar in Office of Multifamily Programs. Today we want to share with you the proposed implementation details on the Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD, as it applies to public housing. Last time we had a more general overview, but today we want to talk about Section 1 of our initial notice, which focuses on public housing. Hopefully by now most of you are familiar with RAD, which was authorized last November in HUD's 2012 appropriations bill. And it's based on the budget proposal in our FY12 budget that many of you were involved in last year. You may have also viewed that first webcast, the overview webcast on March 12th, which, as I mentioned, is now posted on our webpage, and you're welcome to view that at your leisure. That webpage is www.hud.gov//RAD. In this webcast, we'll go into greater detail on the various application procedures, the selection criteria, and the program requirements that apply to converting assistance for public housing. Most of you know that the purpose of RAD is to generate additional sources of financing for both public housing and 3 of the multifamily legacy programs, the so-called orphans, or the Section 8 mod rehab, the rent sup and RAP programs. The need for additional financing sources is especially critical in addressing the substantial backlog of capital needs for public housing, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Some of you have seen the recent apt needs study documenting the capital backlog, showing it to be about $26 billion for public housing. Without additional financing resources, there's no way that we can bring those properties back around, and what happens is we have been historically losing 10 to 15,000 hard units of public housing each year. So it's critical that we develop these additional resources. So the main goal of RAD is to test the conversion, in this case of public housing assistance, to long-term project-based Section 8 rental assistance, to access this private debt and equity that is so very much needed, and to help us stem the loss of these hard units. Another important goal of RAD is to offer residents of public housing and mod rehab more choice and mobility in where they live. We'll address in some detail today how we propose to implement this under the demonstration, recognizing that turnover vouchers are needed to make this work at the PHA level. As a reminder, PIH Notice 2012-18 with respect to public housing is proposed and is intended to solicit your comments. Over the last year, we've had an opportunity to work with many of you and get your input on how we might best implement RAD. The challenge now is to translate the statutory authority that we got from Congress into a workable demonstration. We fully realize that what we're proposing in the notice is neither perfect nor complete, despite being fairly lengthy, and may not appear to sufficiently address all the comments that you offered us last year as we worked together to develop our thinking about RAD. Some of that is by design. We need further input from you in writing to ensure that we have fairly considered various perspectives on an implementation issue or an option. Once we have your comments, we'll thoroughly review them and then issue a final notice guiding RAD's implementation later this spring. And just to remind everyone, the month of June is part of spring. To get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who'll give us an initial overview of public housing. And along the way, as you have questions, please feel free to submit them by email, again, to the email address that I gave you earlier, which is HUD.gov/RAD. We'll get it straight in a minute. It's up there on the whiteboard. I'm sorry, Greg will point it out. But we would like to have your email questions as we go along. But Greg, why don't you give us an overview?
Sure, Pat. I want to turn again to the whiteboard and that we used in the webinar earlier this week on the overview, and just try to lay out what RAD is. So we've published the notice 2012-18, which was on March 8th. And so the RAD Conversion Authority, 3 sets of ownership types: public housing, mod rehab, and rent-sup wrap. Today we're going to focus on public housing, but I'll at least sort of give the broader picture too. Mod rehab today, there's about 25,000 units of mod rehab around the country. Rent-sup and wrap are rental assistance programs that predate Section 8. There's also about 25,000 units of those around the country. So 3 different ownership types. The first component of the demonstration of RAD is for public housing and mod rehab. And these owners can either convert to PBRA, which is the acronym Project-Based Rental Assistance, sometimes refer to that as sort of multifamily housing, or they can convert to project-based vouchers. So once you get selected, you could move to PBRA or PBV in association with the sort of rules we've established in this program for it. But one of the key things is that the Congress only allowed us for 60,000 units under this first component of the demonstration. So public housing or mod rehab, subject to a cap at 60,000 units, can convert their current assistance to PBRA or PBV, but with 2 very important conditions. The first condition is that this has to be done through a competition. And we'll explain more today about what the competition is. But secondarily, that under this first component of the demonstration is that what the Public Housing Authority or mod rehab owner is doing is they're bringing their current funding with them. So they get to convert, but they convert with whatever the current, whether it be in mod rehab, what the current rents are, or in public housing, what is the current funding defined as tenant rents, operating subsidy, and capital fund that's assigned to that project. So that's the first component of the demonstration, which is this 60,000 units. The second component is for both mod rehab owners, who are then actually in both components, or rent-sup wrap owners that can convert their properties to project-based vouchers. They could take the tenant protection vouchers, or TPVs, that the properties get at contract expiration or termination, and they can convert those TPVs to project-based vouchers. And here, there's no cap. So really all it is just subject to the availability every year of how many tenant protection vouchers, which are used for demolitions and dispositions of public housing, used for opt-outs of multifamily, as well as these special ones for these contract terminations here. So public housing, subject to the 60,000 unit cap, move to PBV or PBRA, mod rehab also, but mod rehab can also be part of the second part of the demonstration. We're taking TPVs and converting to PBVs. In the notice that we wrote, 2012-18, public housing is section 1 of the notice, mod rehab is section 2 of the notice, and rent-sup is section 3 of the notice. This section 3 of the notice for rent-sup and wrap, it's effective immediately. That as of the date of the notice, which is March 8th, that we call this interim authority. We're still seeking comments on these, but any owner that sort of has their contract expiring or terminating can proceed with the instructions. When we get comments, we may revise those instructions for future conversions, but right now they have the authority to move forward. But for everything else, for mod rehab and public housing, which will be the focus of today's presentation, it's all proposed. And and we just want to sort of go over the schedule right now of that sort of proposal. So public comments are due April 9th, so 30-day comment period. We're going to work earnestly to turn these comments around, respond to them, issue a final notice, hopefully by around June 1st, which then allow housing authorities, we'll give them 60 days to sort of get used to the instructions that are in the notice, but then we would open up the application window in the month of August. So from August 1st to 31st would be the initial application period. Then we would review those applications, and hopefully we would make our first set of awards by the end of September. And so that's the sort of schedule for the public housing and mod rehab under the first component. A few just other sort of preliminary comments, Pat, is at the same time that we've put the notice out for comment, we've also published a companion Federal Register notice, which the Federal Register notice sort of just lets the broader public know that we've sort of begun this program. But we've also published for comment, the draft application or the proposed application for an owner of public housing or mod rehab, and we'll spend a little time on that application today.
Great. Let me point out, I finally figured out the correct address there. It's rad@hud.gov in the upper right-hand corner for those of you that like to work on submitting some questions by email. So Greg, you mentioned that we have an application format as part of the materials, and I believe it's Excel-based. Can you tell us a little bit about how that application format is going to work?
Sure. And what the viewers should see on their screen now is at least a screenshot of one of the first pages of the application. And so when we've designed the RAD for public housing authorities, what we've really tried to do is make it so it's easy for PHAs to submit an application. And we didn't want them to have to spend a lot of money to sort of prepare an application. We still want them to think through their property. We want them to be thorough and whatnot. But they will find ultimately when after we receive public comment on the application, our goal is that they're out there on the web. There would be a place on the website where you would sort of click on your project. You'd pull down an application. It would be pre-populated with a lot of information. Of course, we know the name of the PHA. Once you tell us once you pull down your property, then the bedroom distribution and all the information we currently have in our public housing information system or PIC. But then what the PHA would do is on this application, it would sort of work through and say, okay, here are my contract rents for this property. We sort of know what that is. What are my operating costs I'm expecting for this property? What are my rehab needs for this property? Both what do I need to do today, but what do I need to do over the next 20 years in terms of sort of long-term? The roof is okay now, but in 12 years I need to fix it, and the boiler's fine now, but in year 8 I need to fix it. So the PHA thinks that through and knows what the rents are, walks through the operating expenses, looks at its capital needs, and looks to see how much that property can actually generate in first mortgage proceeds. And if the property throws off enough NOI or net operating income to cover the capital needs, then you can then finish the application. If, however, that when you're completing the application and you're sort of drilling down through the pro forma, that you find a hole, that the project actually still can't meet the needs. It needs to raise $2 million, but it only can generate $1.9 million, then you won't actually be able to submit the application until you sort of identify in the application where the other sources of funding are. So it's not binding. It's not requiring you to sort of get a firm commitment from a lender at this stage. But what it is asking you to do is to think through how you perceive you're going to recapitalize this property. And then once you work through that, you will then sort of push a button on the application, and it will print out the sort of a nice and neat pro forma, and that's what you'll take to your board. You'll sort of give this to your board, and you say, here's the project. This is what I'm proposing to do with this property, and the board signs it, and that's what you will send back to us for the application. And so what we're hoping is that sort of PHAs, again, this balance between we want you to think through your property well enough, but not have to expend an enormous amount of money to put in an application. And it's only after, which we'll talk later, it's only after you get accepted into the program that then you start running up sort of the more of the pre-development cost associated with your project.
That's great. Before we move on, let me just go back and clarify something. So in a lot of cases, it's going to be typical that a housing authority, its pro forma, may not generate the net operating income to cover the debt to meet the capital need, and therefore that's what the financing plan is all about. We fully expect that in a lot of cases that a housing authority is going to have to look for additional sources of financing. Is that correct?
Sure. So some properties, again, it's a wide spectrum of what the public housing portfolio. We know the apt capital needs study says that the average backlog is about 24,000 per unit, but there's going to be some properties that need 5,000 or 10,000 a unit, and some properties are going to need 40,000 or 50,000 a unit. And those clearly at the sort of higher end of the need continuum are not going to be able to, or not likely to be able to use current funding to meet all their needs. And so they may still be motivated and interested in doing RAD, but they may want to couple RAD with some other source of financing, whether it be low-income housing tax credits or some other sort of grant fund that they were able to find locally. And again, so at the time of application, They don't have to secure that. They just need to say, here's my reasonable plan for sort of meeting these needs.
So Housing Authority completes its application, submits its financing plan. If it needs it, pushes this button, sends the material in. What happens next? How do the applications get scored? When does the Public Housing Authority learn what it can do next?
Right, so of the 60,000 units here, we have to find some way to divide them between public housing and mod rehab. And so for public housing, that the sort of allocation will be 58,750 of the 60,000. And that's because 60,000 units represents about 5% of the public housing inventory, and about 5% of the mod rehab inventory would be about 1,250. So that's the relative share. So what we're trying to do is find some way to allocate or award these 58,750 units. And so the first thing that we do is we've created 4 regional pools. And there's the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and the West. And those pools are representative of the share of public housing units in those regions. And so, so there's both the allocation by region, but within those regions, there's also a sub-allocation or sub-pools for large PHA, medium PHA, and small PHA. So if I'm a small PHA, I don't have to worry about competing with some large PHA that I'm afraid is going to sort of take up all the awards in my region. It's among other small PHAs is really what I'm sort of competing against in that region. So we look at all the applications that come in during that first window, and then we've created 4 ranking criteria. Those ranking criteria is the amount of capital need for your project. Second has to do with whether PHAs will adopt green building practices. A third is for PHAs that are able to secure or sponsor turnover vouchers to support mobility. And a fourth ranking factor is that we use is simply what we call the priority project, or the first project that the PHA wants to sort of designate. If it's deciding that it wants to do sort of submit an application for 10 projects, it can identify one project as its priority or first one, and that gets a higher score over anybody else. And it's a way of sort of helping distribute the awards in case we have such a large demand.
So the Congress asked us to make sure that the authority was fairly distributed, and so that's how we devised the pools, particularly the geographic pools. But what happens if not enough applications are received, say for a medium-sized public housing authority in the Northeast? What do we do? Right.
So in those pools, after that first 30-day window or 30-day period, and we rank everybody according to those 4 ranking factors, and we may be oversubscribed for large PHAs in the Northeast, say. Okay, so we'll create a waiting list. The first set of PHAs, the Northeast, we can, once we reach the cap for large PHA, then all the others sort of are ranked below it. But let's say there's not enough applications for small PHAs or medium PHAs, then after a 60-day period, we'll simply award to whoever else applied in that region. And if there's enough other sort of applicants in that region, regardless of PHA size, we'll make the awards to them.
All right, so my project's been selected. What happens next? And I'm thinking, Margaret, this might be a good chance to turn things over to you, because now we're starting to move to the conversion to the Section 8 platform. Can you help us understand a little bit about how that's going to work, particularly on assembling the financing?
Absolutely. So once a project is selected, it actually enters into what's called a CHAP, or a commitment to enter into a HAP contract. And as Greg mentioned, an applicant will put in a letter of intent for their financing, but it's our understanding that that's just the beginning of the process. We want the PHAs to start building a relationship with a potential lender, but after we provide the CHAP, that's really the period of time where the PHA is going to go out, talk to lenders, talk to tax credit investors, talk to their state HFA, talk to other lenders, and try to actually piece together their financing plan. And included in that is a series of timelines where they'll be actually reporting in their performance. So for example, they'll be submitting the letter of engagement that they have with the lender. Later they'll be updating HUD on getting their due diligence reports, project needs assessments, appraisals, or other kinds of third-party reports. And that CHAP period lasts 180 days. And that's really the time period where the financing plan will be finalized and then submitted to HUD. HUD will review that financing plan, and at that time, that's when the commitment will be issued for the property.
So the CHAP enables you to take 6 months and put a financing plan together. You don't have to have that done at the point of application. That's correct? So let's talk a minute about that 6-month period when I'm out there looking for financing. What kind of financing might a PHA be looking for? And a particular question that we always get is, what about FHA? What about our own insurance programs? Will they be available to support the financing that we're talking about here?
Absolutely, and really RAD was designed to be as flexible as possible to allow a PHA to work with various sources of financing. So I mentioned a couple of those before. A PHA may want to work with a conventional lender, maybe a lender that they've worked with on another development project. They may want to talk to their state housing finance agency, pursue an allocation of tax credits, or as you mentioned, they may be interested in coming to FHA and doing an FHA insured loan, which I think might be a good fit for a lot of these projects. A couple of the programs that we have here at HUD would be a good fit. So the 223F program is our FHA mortgage insurance program for acquisition, refinance, and a modest amount of repairs. So if the project does not need a significant amount of repairs, substantial rehab, it might be a good option. The other option that might be helpful for folks is the Section 221D4 sub-rehab program. And that's a loan program for substantial rehab of properties as well as new construction.
Okay, great. Diane, let's catch things up for a minute. We have a choice. We can convert to project-based rental assistance on the Section 8 platform, but also project-based vouchers on the Section 8 platform. You do a lot of work with our project-based voucher program and work with housing authorities. Can you tell us a little bit how the PBV version of this might work, how it might be different?
Sure. There aren't really many major differences, Pat. The PHA will still have to submit the Excel-based application, including the pro forma. The PHA has to choose whether it plans to go the option of a project-based rental assistance contract or project-based vouchers, but that choice is not binding upon the PHA. But what is binding is the milestones that are listed in the notice. There are certain contractual milestones that the PHA will have to meet, and those are binding. The other thing that is, actually there's only one major difference though, Pat. The difference is where there is a housing authority that chooses PBV but does not administer a voucher program. In that case, if they do not apply for the choice mobility exemption, they will have to identify the agency that plans to sponsor the vouchers.
All right, and that's a big goal and a big issue to kind of understand. We'll kind of come back to that in a minute. But let's go to the post-conversion process. So we'll come back to you, Margaret. What are the rules that the project will live by if it converts all the way to project-based rental assistance? Can you give us a quick overview there?
So what we're calling PBRA is essentially a Section 8 project-based rental assistance HAP contract that essentially is overseen by the Office of Housing here at HUD. The project will move to the Office of Multifamily Housing, essentially, for its oversight. And the contract will be governed by the regulations at 24 CFR Part 880. And it will also be governed by standing and subsequent Office of Multifamily Housing guidance that's related to Section 8 contracts. There are a few differences, though, that I want to highlight. Some of you may have noticed that in the notice we actually included, I think Attachment 1D is the regs at 24 CFR Part 880, which are the Section 8 PBRA regulations. You may have noticed that there's some strike-throughs and red lines, and we actually got some comments. HUD, you accidentally included a red line version of the document. I just want to reassure folks that was actually intentional because there are some differences between the RAD PBRA contracts and our existing contracts. And I'll just go through a few of those. I won't go through the whole list, but a few things that we want to highlight. So the RAD PBRA contracts will have 20-year contract terms. They also have a provision that at the time that the contract expires, there's a condition that the Secretary shall offer and the PHA shall accept a renewal of the contract. There will also be a RAD use agreement associated with those contracts, and that use agreement will actually survive in the case of foreclosure or transfer of the contract. And then there are a few other things related to tenant procedures and tenant rights and responsibilities that I wanted to highlight. One of the major ones is that the procedural rights that are currently in place for public housing residents will carry over to these PBRA contracts. There's also a provision in public housing for the $25 annual per unit of funding for tenant participation, and that will also carry over. So that needs to be built into the budgeting that the PHA does. Again, there are a few other differences, but those are some of the major ones
And
that
they're
I wanted to
detailed in the
highlight.
notice.
They are detailed.
Okay. Diane, back to you. So, post-conversion, what are the rules that guide project-based vouchers?
Well, generally, Pat, the project-based voucher regulations at 24 CFR 983 will apply. But Congress did provide us with some pretty broad waiver authority for the first component of RAD, which these public housing projects qualify for. So there's some pretty broad waivers that are statutory as well as some regulatory waivers. And as Margaret went through a few of hers, I'd like to go through a few that apply to PBV as well. First off, there are 4 broad categories of waivers and alternative provisions as well. In some cases, we're not actually waiving the regulation or waiving the statute, but providing alternative provisions to the program. And the first thing is project selection. The covered projects are exempt from the cap on the amount of project-based vouchers that a housing authority can actually put under contract. Right now, under the program, under the PBV program, a housing authority can project-base up to 20% of its tenant-based annual budget authority. And under RAD, those units that are project-based under the voucher program are exempt from that limitation. Just won't count against that cap. So the PHAs don't have to worry about trying to keep track of, RAD conversions in their regular program as well. Also, the 25% limitation on the number of units that can be assisted in one building. That limitation has been increased to 50%. The exceptions under the PBV program, which include housing for elderly, disabled, and families receiving supportive services, those exceptions will continue to apply. However, the family exception will have some slight modifications in order to prevent displacement of families that are already in place. Also, the owner selection procedures at 983.51, those will not apply to RAD. So there's no competition requirement for PHAs that are interested in project-basing their units. HUD will also entertain waivers to the goals of the PBV program, which is to deconcentrate poverty and expand housing and economic opportunities, and the site selection criteria that is associated with those goals. The second broad category, Pat, is the contract terms. Under the current project-based voucher program, a housing authority has discretion to set the contract term to up to 15 years, the initial term. Under the RAD PBV component of the program, the housing authority will set the term at 15 years. So there is no discretion there. Okay. Also, the RAD statute requires that HUD offer the PHA, and the PHA must accept a renewal contract. There's also a use agreement that is different than under the regular PBV program that has to be adhered to, basically to ensure long-term affordability of the covered projects, and it has to run coterminously with the HAP contract. Also, the contract rent setting is slightly altered. Under the, as Greg, I believe, mentioned, the funding is limited to current funding, so the PBV requirements there are altered. And finally, the rents are adjusted by an operating cost adjustment factor. And then the third broad category of alternate provisions has to do with tenant rights and participation. Rescreening will not take place when these projects are converted, so families won't have to worry about, being terminated from their current unit or from the project that they're living in based on rescreening activity. The PBV lease cannot be terminated without cause. And tenants that receive rent increases that are greater than either 10% or $25, that increase will be phased in over a 3 to 5 year period. And there's some others as well, Pat, that are detailed in the notice. And finally, there are just a few miscellaneous provisions that I just wanted to touch on. One of which is the applicability of the Davis-Bacon in Section 3 requirements to all initial repairs that are identified in the financing plan that qualify as construction or rehabilitation. So those Davis-Bacon requirements, which are basically the labor rate standards and the Section 3 equal employment requirements, they will apply. And it's different than the regular program because under the regular PPV program, if units are considered existing, those requirements would not apply because the owner would not have to enter into an AHAP. However, under RAD for public housing conversions, under PPV, those requirements will apply.
That's a great and thorough list, and again, folks can find them detailed in the notice. What I'm getting out of this, Diane, is what we're trying to do the best we can is to have some things be comparable to PBRA provisions, but there are differences in the PBV program, and we're trying to respect the integrity of that program. So you've talked about the waivers and the things that we can facilitate. There are some PBV rules that are going to apply, again, trying to respect the integrity of the PBV program. Can you highlight a couple of those rules?
Sure. As I said, Pat, the majority of the requirements under the PBV program will apply, but one that I do want to highlight is the requirements under 983.59 concerning PHA-owned housing. In the case of PHA-owned housing, a PHA is required to have a HUD-approved independent entity conduct both HQS inspections and determine rents. And those provisions will apply to these projects that are owned by PHAs.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Diane. Very thorough. Greg, let's come back to you. Let's talk a bit about this no-cost provision that we mentioned at the top that will apply to the demonstration. And let's talk about how that impacts rents in particular, again, focused on the public housing conversions. We have no incremental funding to increase the rents beyond the current allocation of a subsidy that a PHA gets now. So how does that affect the initial rent setting under conversion and how we could potentially adjust rents as we go forward after we set the initial rents? Can you explain that for us?
Sure. In other words, why would I do this if you didn't give me any more money?
Well, that's been a question that some of us have got.
Right.
Yeah.
So there should be on the screen now a chart, and it shows on the left side sort of the current funding, and these are based on 2013 appropriation. I mean 2013 budget request from the department, and that today that the average public housing unit, according to the 2013 budget request, essentially receives $792 per unit per month in funding, which is made up of $330 from the operating fund, $144 PUM from the capital fund, and $318 from tenant rents, total tenant payments. So the typical unit receives $792. Now, most housing authorities tend to these days think they might know the tenant payment plus the operating fund, and they kind of, because they've been doing asset management for 5 or 7 years, but they may not as readily think about, well, I also get a capital fund that sort of my project generates in award. But it's $792, and what a PHA, and so when you convert, then what happens is you're really giving up or turning in your operating fund and your capital fund program, and you're receiving in exchange a housing assistance payment. And since it's at current funding, that housing assistance payment is now going to be at $474. So you still get the $792, but now rather than 2 separate funds, you have 1 fund called the Section 8 Housing Assistance Payment. And so it's that number, 792 in Rochester and 825 in Boston and 650 in Des Moines, whatever, those are all numbers I made up, but to say every agency and every project, even within an agency, those numbers are going to be different. And a PHA has to look at that, look at its particular property and say, what can I do with, if it is 792, what are my operating costs going to be? And we know that from the app capital needs study that was done in 2010, that a quarter of the public housing portfolio has low capital needs, that they're less than 5 or 10,000 a unit in rehab. We also know that 25% of the portfolio needs more than about 28 or 30,000 in needs. So for that number, a PHA will be saying that some PHAs will be able to easily be able to convert with that number, and some it's going to be a tougher climb, and they might therefore consider bringing in some other resources to pull it off.
Okay, great, that's helpful. I'm straining a bit to see the slide, but it's a good opportunity to mention that I think, will shortly have a PowerPoint up on the RAD webpage that illustrates this, including the slide, which I think is very helpful. I also know that you're at work and will publish shortly or make available shortly to confirm I think housing authorities know their capital allocation, their operating numbers, but if they want to confirm the number that they have with the number that we have, those will be published shortly. And I know you said in the application they pre-populate, but the application's not live yet, is that correct? And therefore, you can't go in there today and do that, but you can confirm those numbers.
Right. So the application today is proposed. So we've have on the website what the application looks like. You can play around with it and all that, but when it's finalized after public comment, it will be pre-populated. We don't have all the pre-populations in there now, but in addition, as you said, this notion of what is current funding for a particular public housing project and what it is for Johnson Homes versus Robert King High versus whatever, that we'll put on the website within the next 30 days for every project across the country what that current funding level is right now based on 213 budget request.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Let's switch gears for a minute. Let's go back to what I talked about at the top as another important goal of RAD. In addition to trying to leverage the financing, preserve the inventory, one of the things we're trying to do is give some choice and mobility to residents. It's a very important goal, we know that, and we've been trying to come up with the best and fair way to make this work, recognizing that housing authorities don't necessarily have a large surplus of turnover vouchers to support this. So can you kind of walk us through what we're proposing to do to pay attention to that issue, but also make this work?
Sure, I want to go back to the whiteboard here. So in terms of what the choice mobility requirements will be, we've divided into those properties that convert to PBV versus those properties that convert to project-based rental assistance. And so for those that convert to PBV, it's just the standard PBV rules. We didn't do anything special under RAD. We said, well, if you're going to convert to PBV, you'll be subject to the choice requirements that are in there, which is essentially it's after 1 year that a family is eligible to receive a voucher after 1 year, but it's subject to the availability or sort of equal housing assistance. It's subject to the availability of turnover vouchers in that agency. So if that agency has 100 units that become available every year, then the family would be eligible for those turnover vouchers. But for PBRA, that we decided to make it 2 years of residency that a family would be eligible for it, or the latter of 2 years or after the completion of repairs. Because what we want to do is we want to have the properties competitive. We want to say, well, let's give the housing authority a chance to fix up the property. If the first set of repairs are going to take 3 years, then it's once the property is renovated, then the choice mobility kicks in. So either 2 years after I move in or the completion of repairs.
So we know how it works for PBVs, the 1 year, and the resident has the right to request a voucher, et cetera. We talked about a difference in the tenure under PBRA, but there's some other dimensions that we've put into the proposed notice to help with the demand on the turnover vouchers. Can you walk us through those additional components?
So other than just the 2 years, that the other sort of conditions, this is the option of the PHA. A PHA can decide to use this authority or not. So the first is the PHA can decide that it's can limit the number of turnover vouchers that are available to the agency that year for RAD to not more than a third. So if an agency has 10 vouchers that turn over a year, then 3 of those vouchers would be eligible to contribute to whatever project has been converted. So that's one. So we don't put undue pressure on the agency's voucher program to support this. And the second is that the housing authority can decide to put a 20% cap by project that if I had a 100-unit project, that no more than 20 families wanting choice mobility in any one year. You could decide to limit it to 20. And so if 25 families wanted to exercise choice in that year, the other 5 would go on some waiting list for the next year. And we think that's sort of a reasonable way in which for PHAs to get to our goals for choice, which are very important, but also some of the concerns PHAs have about sort of running up their turnover vouchers and using them exclusively for this program.
Another thing that we're trying to encourage is frankly to depend on the kindness of your fellow PHA, where you may have extra turnover vouchers and you might be able to basically commit them to an authority in a project that doesn't have, is sort of bumped up against these caps and is looking for vouchers. How does that work? What are we doing to encourage that?
Right, so I think maybe I'll start with is to say that something I hadn't explained yet is we also have this provision that up to 10% of our awards can be exempt from the choice requirement. And for someone to apply for this 10% exemption, they either must be someone who doesn't operate a voucher program, so I don't have any vouchers, in which case I would have to find someone else to contribute. Or today, where a third of my vouchers, my turnover vouchers today, are either used for veterans or for the homeless. If I'm a PHA that either has no vouchers or where a third of my turnover every year is committed to the veterans or the homeless, then I can apply for an exception. And we will give up to 10% of all our awards under RAD will be this choice mobility exception, where they won't be required to offer choice for that.
So then explain how a housing authority can work with another housing authority to help out.
Right, so if I may apply for let's say I'm an agency with no vouchers, and one thing I can do is apply for an exemption. Or if I choose not to apply for an exemption, then if I'm going to do PBVs, I may do PBR, I may ask for another agency to sort of sponsor my turnover vouchers. And if I can get that agency to sponsor, we'll give additional ranking points to that agency who both sort of struck the deal, but also the agency that was sponsoring these vouchers as an incentive to get people to provide these resources.
So just to recap, the goal is there. We're offering a choice mobility option to all residents, PBV, PBRA. Simultaneously, we're trying to recognize the reality that there just are not sufficient vouchers out there to get the job done. And so we really have to look to housing authorities to commit their turnover vouchers, which are limited. And so we have to understand and respect that. So we're trying to find a way where we can sort of balance the goal's important. We want to do this. We'll encourage people. We'll give you more points and ranking factors to help one another out. That there are going to be some realities. There just aren't enough turnover vouchers. So that's something that, frankly, we've worked on. This is what we're proposing, and we'd like to get your comments on that.
It's why that this is all out for 30-day comment. This is clearly one of the places in our Federal Register companion notice where we've asked PHAs for comment on to see if we've sort of struck the right balance with the goal of choice, but also the constraints that are sort of there within the voucher sort of turnover.
With an eye on the clock, let's move to wrap this up. But let me ask you one final question. We all know, everybody in this room, I think everybody participating today, that RAD is a little bit complicated given the statutory direction. I mean, on one hand, there's no additional funding to help with rents and do this, that, or the other thing. And we have no additional funding for incremental vouchers to support the choice mobility. And at the same time, public housing owners, public housing authorities, and owners of mod rehab properties have been coming to us and they're saying, when are you going to open the window? We want to do this. Given the challenges, the complexity, the no money, the varying requirements, what is it that is making sense to the calls that you're fielding from PHAs and others?
So, Pat, I'm going to try to put my hat on as a former executive director of a large housing authority, and so this was now probably 20 years ago. That was the case, and it was even more constrained than the world of sort of mixed finance and all that. But you know, back then, and I'm sure as PHAs today, sometimes you go home at night and you hit your head against the wall because you said, I got this inventory that I want to be proud of and I want my board to be proud of and my mayor and the resident proud of, but I only have so much capital funds that I'm awarded, and I'm not a magician, and I'm not, what can I do with this? And I don't want to just jettison it and say get rid of it. I really wish I had this tool. I mean, I say this with full disclosure because, you know, here we are as part of the RAD team that we believe deeply in it, and it's sort of we're creating the program rules. But it's also something that I wish I had as a former executive director sort of in my hands then. And I look at my old inventory and I say, yeah, there are properties where I could have easily converted with the funding that we currently sort of would be for that property. And then there'd be others where it would be more of a stretch. But it might be an asset that I could work with the local government to say, this is an important asset. I can bring the Section 8 funding in. If we can couple that with some tax credits or something like that, then we have something to do that can really improve this neighborhood. Otherwise, the property just gets starved for another sort of decade or more. So I would really be sort of looking at this. And again, it's voluntary. No one's required to do this. But to me, it's an answer that just didn't exist before. And then the real sort of icing on the cake to me is it's both, I believe, a sort of a more stable financing platform, but also it's, to me, very enticing the fact that I'm sort of entering the sort of multifamily sort of or Section 8 sort of housing regulatory scheme, which I think is sort of more stable, more rational today than what appears to be sort of the constant changing sort of ground underneath the PHA with respect to the rules one year, the next year. And to me, this would seem as if I could plan much more easily for my next couple decades than I can in the public housing program.
It's a helpful perspective. Thank you. Margaret, Diane, Greg, everyone. Let's wrap this up now, and we'd like to move to taking your questions. And again, still some time to submit them by email, rad@hud.gov. As those questions are coming in, let me just make sure that everyone is aware that we will have 2 additional webcasts, both tomorrow actually. One that will go deeper into the mod rehab program, and Diane's done a lot of work on mod rehab. She'll lead us through that. And then in the next hour after that, we'll turn to the Rent, Sup, and Wrap program because we know that those owners have a distinct point of view. They just have Rent, Sup, Wrap projects, and frankly, some of their contracts are terminating as we speak. So we're going to go more deeply into that tomorrow. Details about how to tune into that are all on our webpage, www.hud.gov/rad. So let's look to see if we've got some questions coming in. I see one here, Greg, and again, we'll try to focus on the public housing questions. If others come up, we'll see if we can take them or maybe come back to them tomorrow. The first one that came up, and I've gotten this one before, the competition under the first component places a heavy emphasis on the level of capital needs that a public housing authority or owner will have to address through a RAD conversion. That is, we're trying to encourage that in the ranking factors. But are we excluding projects with lower capital? What's the reason behind that ranking factor? What are we trying to achieve there? Can you talk about that?
One of the primary reasons for RAD, of why we went to the Hill with other stakeholders to get it authorized, is we have this $26 billion or $25 billion backlog. And so one of our first priorities is to take care of that backlog. So for those properties that are able to sort of to do that, whether with the current funding and a simple first mortgage, or if they go track some other financing, that they get a little bit ahead in the line than those that don't. But we don't, at the same time, we're not trying to exclude any other PHA. That preservation is not just, how do I preserve an asset? I preserve it because it needs a good chunk of capital funds today to fix the roofs and whatnot. But preservation also means putting it on a stable subsidy platform and setting aside amounts in the replacement reserve this year, next year, the year after. So when I need to fix the boiler in year 12, I've got the money for it. So those who have lesser capital needs today, although they may not get as high a scoring, that we still encourage and want them also to apply and to convert. And you don't know, and we don't know, no one knows to what extent the applications will come in which PHAs. You'll see a lot of PHAs with high capital needs, or you'll see PHAs mostly with lower capital needs. So I certainly want to encourage any PHA to, even if it has lower capital needs and is interested in this for long-term preservation, to still submit an application.
So I see another question here. They want you to put that former executive director of PHA hat back on. Okay. And very specifically, the question is, can you, from that point of view, as a former ED of a housing authority, can you analyze the differences between choosing PBVs versus PBRA? Now, I know that puts you a bit on the spot, and we've worked hard to make the choice available to either either platform, PBV, right. PBRA. But from your vantage point as an executive director, what's your take on that?
A great question, and one of the most strategic questions after sort of analyzing your asset and deciding sort of what do I need to raise funds and will my numbers work or not, is then say, which choice? Am I going to PBV or PBRA? So the first thing that jumps off the page for PHAs and look at the PBV program is it's more lightly regulated. There's not a REACT physical inspection. There's not a multifamily management and occupancy review. There's not even an annual financial statement that's submitted for PBVs. So the rules are lighter, and so for some PHAs that might be attractive. Countering that is that there is less experience with lenders today with the PBV program than there is with the PBRA program. And so we only have 60, 80,000 PBV units across this country. 65,000 units. And so, and because those rules prior to RAD, you could only have a contract of 15 years, and even recently it was 10 years, right? That's right. So the lending community has tended to sort of offer a little bit different terms for PBVs historically. Now we hope to educate them so that they offer the same type of long-term financing you see in Margaret's programs, but they may still have a perception that this is sort of the PBVs, I'm only going to give you a 15-year term or something like that. So, so it's I'd want to make sure that the lender is as accepting to it. Another concern that you might have with the PBV is that unlike the multifamily PBRA, which has not been historically subject to proration. So when the Congress, every year HUD puts together a budget for the project-based rental assistance account, and we say, okay, this is the amount, and it's roughly $9 billion a year. But what you don't see is the Congress saying, well, tell you what, we'll give you 90 cents on the dollar. You can get by with that. Well, which is what they've done in public housing. Well, in the voucher program, there's the Congress also, there's a proration, today that we tend that some years you don't get 100% of what your sort of housing assistance payments needs are under the voucher program. So the extent that a voucher program is not fully funded by the Congress, then it also may affect sort of your decisions about the PBV program. So less likely to be prorated in the PBRA program, maybe a more stable platform, maybe sort of more familiar financing from lenders. On the other hand, PBV is more lightly regulated today.
Okay, great. Let's stick with the financing theme for a minute. Another question has come in about underlying debt now. And the question is, how will HUD handle properties with existing EPC's energy performance contracts currently on them now, wishing to convert, in this case, to project-based vouchers? So you've got some debt right now on an AMP or a project, and you want to go seek financing, and typically a lending source, a mortgage financing source is going to say, hey, I want the first position on this. How are we going to be approaching that?
So maybe a hokey example to start with, but a simple one is I have existing debt on my house, and my daughter just went to first year of college, and we need to find a way to pay for that. So we refinanced our house and our mortgage, and so we paid off the first mortgage and took out a larger new mortgage. So we would want to the first thing a housing authority would want to try to do is the same, is refinance that energy performance contract debt, or if you have a capital financing program, also see if the lender's willing to just pay it off.
Right.
Make
So
it,
when you say refinance, you mean in the context of seeking the financing for a RAD conversion to kind of work that out?
So I might have, for example, $20,000 per unit in need of new need, but I have $4,000 or $5,000 in an energy performance sort of debt per unit that
So
I've.
you'd be looking for 25 per
I'm looking for
unit that way
$25,000
when you approach the lender for a RAD commitment.
Right, that's
Okay.
the easiest, simplest way. You could still, if the lenders, if both the initial the APC lender and your new lender are willing to continue those arrangements, you could still pay for both out of the net operating income. But probably your best terms and the easiest would be just have one new loan for the property.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Here's a question that is a bit of a thorny one, but let's give it a go. And the question is, I'm going to read it because it's got a couple parts to it. Section 1 of the notice provides for phasing in tenant rent increases resulting from conversions that are greater, the greater of 10% or $25. Can you see this question? It's probably helpful to see it. But since the program assumes retention of existing subsidy levels, under what conditions would a conversion result in this level of rent increase? That is, why would we even be concerned about sort of a bump in a tenant contribution?
Right. So one of the guiding principles of this is to do no harm. Do no harm to the property, do no harm to tenants. Part of conversion. It's one of the reasons we have the provision that says no rescreening. We don't want to force people out simply because we're trying to preserve this asset as affordable housing. So a similar principle is here with tenants that for the most part, the rent calculation procedures for public housing are almost identical to Section 8. And one of the places where it's not perfectly lined up is in the case of flat rents, that housing authorities have been able to set flat rents that are supposed to be equal to market, but sometimes the housing authority may not have known market very well. And if you sort of leave the public housing program and you take away that flat rent provision, it might be that families rent, if say they make $1,000 a month and they should be paying $300, but the housing authority a flat rent of $200, well suddenly under Section 8 they should be paying $300.
Right.
And so really this is just mostly in those cases that if that family is paying $200 today but really should be paying $300 because the flat rent wasn't set right, then we're giving them 3, or at the PHA's option 5 years to sort of phase it in. It doesn't affect the current funding to that property, still stays the same. We're not sort of changing that. It's just making it sort of easier for the family to adjust to the new rent scheme.
Great.
Can I make another
Yep.
comment on that as well? It's a slightly different issue, but I just wanted to mention it because we've heard some questions before. When some folks have sort of seen that graphic of the funding transferring over to Section 8, the HAP contract being sort of the steady amount, I think some folks have understood that to mean that the tenant portion of the rent is going to be locked in and fixed.
Right.
It won't be. It'll essentially convert over to what we do in the multifamily side, where we do income verification, and that tenant rent portion may go up or down. It's the overall contract rent that's going to be set and then adjusted with OCAS.
That's great.
That's very helpful. Here's another question, and maybe since I was just with a group of investors and lenders this morning, I'll take this one on. The question is, have you talked to investors about their appetite for this product as part of a deal using 4% low-income housing tax credits? Do they believe in the stability of PBVs? Are they comfortable with a PHA management capacity and the relatively low level of operating costs? Now, these are all good questions, and these are all fair questions that are going to be coming at PHAs. But let me sort of take them first, and if we could put the question back up, that might help me remember the sequence. The first question about 4%, we actually think that there's a sweet spot for RAD deals with the 4% tax credit. That is, it's more oriented to moderate rehabilitation. With existing sort of the limitation on current subsidy, we're not going to be able to reach deep. This is not the Choice Neighborhoods program or a Hope 6 program. We're not going to be able to do $125,000 per unit. We know that. On the other hand, we do think that a lot of the capital needs study bore this out. The average capital needs about $30,000. That's a pretty good marker for a 4% tax credit. In other words, that can help generate investment for that. So the shorter answer to this question is yes. As recently as this morning, we talked about this, and one of my fellow panelists from New York basically said, we think this is a great program for 4% tax credits. As to the follow-on question about what a lender will look at, certainly they're going to look at your management capacity, your track record. It'd be very helpful if you have participated in tax credit deals, or maybe a 202 deal, or maybe you have Section 8 properties. It won't exclude you from being considered, but they will want to look at your capacity. They'll want to see your vacancy rate. They'll want to see your operating costs. These are the kind of things, this is the rigor of the underwriting process that, frankly, we're going to rely on the discipline of lenders and investors to take a hard look at to make those judgments. So yes, they will look hard at those, and housing authorities, I think, are prepared for this and are able to put on the table what a potential lender or investor is looking at. I want you to take on this relatively low level of operating costs, because that's an issue related to how we fund operating costs now, which
I think what the questioner maybe have been saying was the low-level operating subsidy possibly, as opposed to cost. But I think PHAs are better prepared for this than they ever have because of the conversion to asset management over the past 5 or 7 years. That this is sort of almost like the natural extension of this. And if they hadn't been doing asset management, it'd be much tougher to walk into the door of a lender or an investor and say, I want a loan and I want an equity investment. And they say, well, show me what your operating costs or your revenue is for this project. And there's no balance sheet for the project. There's no operating statements. But now if they have that, then they're in a position to say to the lender, well, here's my history of this particular project. And now the lender, because most lenders, that's the standard rule. I look at the last 3 years of your income and expenses and see how from there what the future might predict. But what you're going to have to start with the lender is back that early slide. What's my 792 number? Is it 792 for this project? Is it 850? Is it 650? You're starting with, here's the funding I'm going to get for this project, and then defend whether those estimates of operating costs and all can generate and support the NOI that you need.
I recently spoke at a conference of multifamily lenders, and I was competing against Happy Hour. And basically, I couldn't think of any other way to sort of compete with that, but I basically put the word out. There's a guy in this room that's talking about potentially 500 new Section 8 contracts that will be put out by the department. The room was packed. Happy hour started later. The point of all that being is that I think that lenders and investors have gotten very comfortable, both with PBVs even, but PBRA over the years, and are going to look to the stability of that contract. And the fact that we're offering new contracts as part of these conversions, I think, is of interest. But that'll be up to all of you, is to talk with lenders, investors in your area, your region, work your deal, your project, your numbers. And frankly, that's part of what RAD is all about, is to test that. All right, I'm getting the high sign on where you've gone over on our time a little bit, but there's one more question that let's take as the final question that does not prevent you from continuing to submit questions to us, which we will take up either in our upcoming webcast tomorrow, or we'll do our best. We try to do it each day to look at the questions that are coming in at rad@hud.gov and try to get responses back to you all. So for the final question for today's webcast, the presenter said the contract terms would be 20 years for PBRA and 15 years for PBV, with a requirement to renew upon contract expiration. How many times must the contract be renewed? If the PHA is not obligated to renew a second time, what happens if the PHA does not renew the HAP contract? So Greg, I know there's a PHA answer to that, and then there's a mod rehab answer to that. So I'm going to ask you to give us the PHA answer to that, and maybe Diane can help us with the mod re part.
Or if you want to defer mod rehab till tomorrow.
Well, let's go with yours. And
that the PHA is required to renew. The statute says after the initial term, the secretary shall offer and the PHA shall accept. So these really are long-term affordable contracts. And the PHA, if in 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road decides that there's something happening with that neighborhood that it would like to move the assistance to another project, it can still do that, and we allow for it. You can transfer the authority, but the PHA is the secretary must offer, and the PHA must accept the renewal.
Great. Diane, you want to give us a little tip-off for tomorrow? We'll go into more detail talking about mod rehab, but you want to quickly respond to that before we wrap?
For the first component of RAD, what Greg says applies to mod rehab as well for the first component. Right?
For the
for the first component of RAD.
It's a long notice we
okay.
prepared. Is that for mod rehab, we'll pick this up again tomorrow, but but they don't have a requirement to renew after the first term.
Okay.
There's an exception, and the reason that we're we're looking at ourselves is there's several different ways that mod rehab can go. One is in the first component of the bill, certain things apply to it, and then in the second component of the bill, certain things apply to it. So it does not. We'll come back to that. We'll make that clear. We'll have a diagram tomorrow because it is very complicated for mod rehab. That's why we're going to devote the whole session on that. But a very good question. So with that, I want to wrap up today's webcast. Thank you, everyone, for your patience at the top. We know we were a little behind with catching up with getting on the air, but we appreciate you staying with us. And again, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll be able to focus at 3 o'clock Eastern time, 2 o'clock Eastern time on the mod rehab program. And then at 3 o'clock Eastern time, we'll dig into Rents Up and Wrap. Details again on the webpage, www.hud.gov/rad. See, I'm getting better at reading that. Thank you, everyone. Good day.